Hi, welcome to the channel, Transformation, Multidimensional Healing. My name is Craig Hanke. I am a holistic healer, empath, and intuitive. On this channel, I'm sharing all kinds of practical self-healing information and techniques to help empower each one of us on our own personal ascension journeys. Today, I thought I'd do a little story time. Story time! And share a little bit of my history and my experience with this eating approach that I have been following for more than 30 years now, that has completely transformed my life on all levels of my being from the get-go. So picture this. Raver. I'm done with that. I'm right on track. I'm done with that. I'm right on track. I'm done with that. I'm right on track. Time for rebirth. So I actually became vegetarian when I was 17. And so I was vegetarian for 7 years, and then I was vegan for 2 years. And I was following all the rules. I was following everything that you're supposed to do. You know, combining my beans and my rice and my this and my that, and following all the rules, everything they tell you to do. And yet I kept watching my health deteriorate. I was eating healthy. I wasn't eating junk food. And yet my health just kept deteriorating. And, I was kind of at a loss. And so I had just started working at this natural food store, which, looking back, I can see was completely cosmically orchestrated for me to show there, or to end up there, because I started working. One of the women that I worked with, I actually worked in the nutrition and body care department, and so one of the women I worked with one day started talking about this psychic and healer and nutritional counselor that she works with. And it was one of those moments where as soon as she started talking about it, something inside me was just like, lifeline, lifeline. And I was like, who is it? And give me your number. And how can I get in touch? And, and so, that was the start of my journey, working with my mentor, who is a very, very gifted psychic, medical intuitive, and nutritional counselor, who literally came up with this way of eating after working with and talking to thousands and thousands of bodies. Over time, patterns started to emerge of what bodies wanted to heal, to come back into balance, what bodies found challenging to digest, what bodies found easy to digest. And so it all got kind of formulated into an eating approach based on digestion, which is one of those things for as much talk as there is about diets and you should eat this way and you should eat that way. You never really hear people talking about digestion. Is this easy for your body to digest? Is this hard for your body to digest? So basically, this eating approach was about taking all of the food stresses out of your diet. Stop giving your body foods that it can't digest and process easily. Give it only easy to digest foods, food-based supplements, so that it always has the nutrients it needs to do the healing that it needs. And basically getting out of the way, giving your body the raw materials it needs to heal itself, and the magic happens. So So for me, I made my appointment with my new lifeline. And and from the very first moment that I started working with her, it was just all the diet stuff that she was sharing with me. It just made so much sense on a completely practical level. There was no like shoulds or shouldn'ts. There was no judgment. It was like 100% practical. It was like, can your body digest this? Yes or no? Will this help or hurt your body? Yes or no? Very simple, basic questions. So I started on this diet, and like I said, I'd been vegan for 2 years. I was very much up in that mental tangle that can happen. Again, this is 30 years ago. Things have changed dramatically, but back then, it was not so common to be vegan, and it was also pre-internet too. So you have to remember that there was like limited amounts of information that you could readily access. You're going to books and different things like that. So anyway, long story short, so I'd been vegan, and I was very much in a mental tangle with the whole thing. This is how you eat. This is how you do it. Da 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 da. It was all very, very mental. I was super, super disciplined. It was very restrictive. There was no joy in the process. I mean, it was really like, anyway. So, long story short, I started following this diet approach. I had my first session with my mentor. She tuned into my body, told me exactly what I could digest in that moment, what I couldn't digest. I had a list of yes and no foods. And even then, during that session, all of the information was, it just made so much sense. And it really it was like that gong of truth that can resonate, when something's truth, it's just like truth that just resonates inside of you. So that was my experience of finding out the information. And then, of course, we'll fast forward. So, one of the things I had to step away from, like I said, was I was in such a mental tangle with the veganism and all the shoulds and the shouldn'ts and the judgments and the this and the that. And it was really about coming into like a completely new relationship with my body and how food was being processed by my body and how it was feeling and all of those things. So, immediately, in terms of like the yes and no foods I could have, my body could have yogurt, my body could have fish, and those were two protein sources that, obviously as a vegan, I was not doing. And so it was like, well, your body can digest these. You don't have to eat them, but you can, So it was one of those trips. And so I spent the next, I don't even know how long. It didn't take very long, I have to say. I caved pretty fast on the yogurt front, because once I kind of gave myself permission to step out of the mental judgment and to just tune into what my body was, and my body was literally like, yes, yogurt, yes. And so I actually started eating some yogurt again, and I mean, it was just like I could not stop myself from like wolfing down. It was like a starved animal that finally has some food. And anyway, Fish took a little bit longer. But it wasn't very long after that where again it was like the needs and the wants of my body just started to override the mental stuff that I was untangling. And so, like I said, I had been working in a health food store, and they had a really wonderful seafood department. And it was a new store, so they were still at that point of like giving out free samples and doing that, all that kind of stuff. And so the guy at the seafood counter was very invested in trying to get me to eat some stuff. And so he'd like tempt me with little like delicious morsels of different kinds of fish. And I think it was finally this really nice tuna, fresh tuna. And I was kind of like, oh my God, do I do it? Do I do it? And I finally ate it. And it was like the heavenly chorus, the angels sing. My body was like, oh my God! Ah! And so, needless to say, it didn't take very long for that one to shift too. So, as big a transition as shifting to this eating approach was on a physical level, it was much more like the mental and emotional levels that were almost even more challenging. Because like I said, I had to let go of so many constructs and judgments and the shoulds and the shouldn'ts and the rules and the blah, 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 So that was my entry into this way of eating. And I will have to say, we'll just fast forward and skip through this a little bit now. After 9 months of following this eating approach, I guess I'll skip back a little bit and say the other thing that was going on when I started this eating approach was I was extremely hypoglycemic, which I wasn't familiar. Again, also another thing that really was not out there in the public arena 30 years ago in quite the same way. But back then, I hadn't even heard of it. And, and I think I was like between like a 6 and a 7 on a scale of 1 to 10. And so when you're at that level of hypoglycemia, it's kind of a roller coaster ride. Your emotions are all over the place. Your mind is all over the place. You can have weird physical stuff. You can have depression. You can get headaches. You can get, but the main obvious ones are those major, big, like sugar crashes. Like throughout the day, having those crashes. And then the other thing about hypoglycemia is it's so all-consuming, and it kind of just flavors and filters your whole reality through it. And so everything kind of had this semi-hysterical edge to it, I have to say, even at the best of times. But for me, the biggest thing with my hypoglycemia was the emotional stuff, the emotional roller coaster, the just constant like ups and downs, the dips and the highs and the lows and that sort of thing. So, within, a week and a half of shifting over to this eating approach, I was already feeling relief from the hypoglycemia symptoms, the worst of them. Theoretically, it really takes about a year for you to completely heal your pancreas, which is tied in with hypoglycemia, because it is one of its jobs is to make insulin. But losing my train of thought here. Yeah, so literally within like a week maybe even the first few days, but definitely the first week, week and a half. All of a sudden, it was like going from these huge like ups and downs and ups and downs. It was much more of this experience of this like this steadying process. And one of the things that happened along with that was the realization that, oh, I'm not crazy, I'm not insane, I'm not completely messed up, I'm just hypoglycemic and my body's out of balance. And all of these physical reactions were so strong that it's easy to get lost in it. It's easy to get lost in the fact that, wait, this is a body reaction. This isn't actually who I am, but just a body reaction. And so, literally within, like I said, a couple weeks, that already started to shift. And then over time, over the months, it just got better and better. I just felt more and more even keeled. I had more emotional balance. I had more, my mind was quieter. And it was one of those amazing realizations, just how powerful all of these imbalances can be in your body and in your experience of reality. I mean, it really is like a filter on your whole reality. And this is just one example that I'm talking about with hypoglycemia, even though, estimates are that about 80% of the general population has some level of hypoglycemia, even if they're not having extreme symptoms. So it is a super common one, but, when you start to develop nutritional deficiencies and your body is short on nutrients, it starts pulling the nutrients from, less critical body functions. And that's when you start having little symptoms pop up here and there. And really, that is depending a lot on your genetic makeup. For example, like a B deficiency, for some people that will cause them to like break out in hives, while another person, a B deficiency, might have them to have brittle nails. So a lot of it depends on your genetics and your individual body, how those deficiencies will manifest into symptoms. So, all right, now we'll fast forward. So 9 months later, I've been following this eating approach for 9 months. And I suddenly wake up one day and I'm feeling energy in my body, in my soul. It's basically, it's the heart center. And all of a sudden, I was having basically, I guess I was tuned into, the best way to describe it is that all of a sudden I was consciously tuned in to the positive and negative energy flows in my body. This was not something I tried. This is completely spontaneous. It just happened with a certain level of healing and clearing. But so all of a sudden I had this whole new way of accessing information. I had a built-in yes or no. Some people use this, will use applied kinesiology, muscle testing, to get their yes and no answers. And this kind of is a form of that, but it's all internal. You're feeling the energy in your body. And so I woke up one day and all of a sudden I'm feeling positive energy flows in my body. And when I ask a yes question, I feel this lift. When I have a no question, I feel this heaviness and this real drop. And it was so obvious. And it was very exciting because it felt like, oh my God, direct communication. I mean, I can literally find out exactly what I need in each and every moment. And I started using it for all kinds of guidance, not just food, but everything, like I'm going to the store, I'm going to get this list of food, how much money do I need to bring? And I just kept using it like this, like in a very specific kind of way like that. And it just kept getting confirmed over and over again. I mean, this was also a big part of my initial spiritual awakening. So there was just so much excitement and wonder and just like, oh my gosh, about the whole experience, because it was just felt like one revelation after another, and that was 9 months of following this eating approach. And like I said, it was basically like a spontaneous awakening. And I do believe that it was, my physical body had healed and come into balance enough to allow these subtle energies to be experienced and felt by me. Whereas when I was so out of balance, so hypoglycemic, my emotions all over the place, my mind all over the place, and it just provided this clarity that allowed all this other stuff to unfold for me. So 9 months, start with I got my positive, negative energy flows. I got my new guidance system built in. And then it just went from there, basically, within a few months after that I was living in Chicago at the time. I was very much I went to art school there. I was very much a little like gay club kid, warehouse party, rave guy. I mean, I was very much into that whole scene when I was in Chicago. And then after I had my awakening, gosh, it was only, I think maybe it was only a few months after that I just felt really, really called to get out of Chicago. I had to get out of the city. I felt like it was killing me. And so I took this huge leap of faith, sold everything I owned. I moved to New Mexico. I'd never been there. My mentor that I'd been working with did live there. I think that was part of the reason I felt called there. But I thought I was going to move to Santa Fe, even though, again, I'd never been there. But I kept having those synchronistic experiences where, like Santa Fe, it just kept like Santa Fe, from all these different directions, And I specifically remember telling a friend about these experiences I was having, where I was just like, oh my God, everywhere I go, it's Santa Fe, Santa Fe, Santa Fe, and we were sitting in this group thing, and the person in front of me turns around, and they're like, I just got back from Santa Fe, and it was that thing, like over and over, so it just felt very confirming. I dropped out. It was the start of my whole dropped out journey, which I think I'll talk about in another video, but needless to say, that was the initial breakthrough from shifting to this eating approach, again, based on the easiest to digest foods and easy to digest food-based supplements. And my sensitivity, my healing, everything has only progressed more and more and more every single day since that initial breakthrough 30 years ago. So, part of the reason that I'm on here is to share this practical information that made such a profound difference in my life. It truly, truly transformed my life on every level of my being eventually. But it was the physical foundation, getting my body into balance. That was really the initial step that allowed all of these other levels of healing to unfold, because it's almost impossible when your body is out of balance, nutritionally deficient, your systems are out of balance, you're just not operating at your best, and it's almost, people do it, but I do feel like, with that imbalance comes a bit of distortion. Everything is getting filtered through that out of balance body. And so I do think that, like, even though you're getting spiritual info or you're channeling this or getting a download or whatever, I do feel like if you are out of balance, then there is a certain level of distortion that's happening with that information. Everything always goes through our individual filters anyway, but being out of balance just exacerbates that whole scenario. So I just wanted to share that with you. My initial, I guess, my I wanted to share that initial story of my stepping into this way of eating. And so, again, we'll fast forward 30 years later now. And even though now, obviously the online world is completely different, there is so much information out there, almost too much information. And so I felt very, very compelled to start sharing this way of eating and sharing all of these very simple shifts that you can make in your diet and your daily life that will have really profound effects. And I know if you're on this ascension path, that it can get a little like a little obsessive-y maybe, a little focused on what's happening and the results and wanting bells and whistles and the big hurrah and the big to-do and the da-da-da-da. And the reality is, I have to say that yes, there is all of that along the way. And depending on, again, I had those experiences more 30 years ago in my initial awakening. And everything has just gotten to be a little bit more on subtle levels since then. But, the people that are just waking up now, they're having those experiences. That's why they're having such seemingly dramatic breakthroughs and stepping into these whole other abilities and senses of self than they've had before. And, part of that is just a larger timing thing. We're all meant to unfold in our own timing, our own perfect organic process. And so, like I said, I just felt very drawn to start sharing this information and to also start offering my healing services and my ease of digestion based nutritional healing services on a broader level, to try and reach more people with this information, because it's so important and so foundational. And like I said, even though there's so many different diet approaches out there and so much information, I feel like there's still just these huge gaps, and there's these huge gaps in understanding that I hope to fill with some of this information. But I did want to share that I'm always available for one-on-one sessions, and I offer two types of one-on-one client sessions: ease of digestion based nutritional healing with intuitive diet workups and intuitive counseling, where I basically set you up on the diet, the new diet approach, set you up with food-based supplements, set you up with the foods that your body can digest in this moment. And then as your body heals and comes into balance gradually, and your nutrient levels come up, and one of the first things your body does is restore your digestive enzyme levels once it has the available nutrients. And so your enzyme levels come up, and so all of a sudden you can start adding in other foods that are more difficult to digest. And so I do focus my main part of my healing practice on doing this ease of digestion based nutritional healing because it is so foundational. It's so foundational to bring your body back into balance and healing, to really access and get to the core and root of all these other issues on the emotional, mental, and spiritual levels. So I would highly recommend diving in. If you're already eating a more natural, whole foods based diet, then the shift into this eating approach is going to be much easier for you. It'll just be a little tweaking and shifting things around and stopping different food combinations. But if you are still out there and you're giving up processed foods and pesticides and growth hormones and eating organic for the first time, I mean, if you're shifting at that level, it's going to be a much bigger deal to shift over to this diet approach. No less worthy and probably more dramatic results quicker, but it is going to be a much bigger lifestyle shift. So, like I said, my main thing is ease of digestion based nutritional healing. I do offer general intuitive sessions with intuitive counseling and intuitive guidance, which also includes what I deem as whole being life coaching, which is really addressing the healing on all levels of your being. So I would say if all of this sparks your interest, check out my website, ascensionfirstaid.com. I have a whole lot more information on there about the diet and what the experience of the diet and the actual experience of the session will be like. And then get in touch. I have to say that it sounds like an infomercial. It sounds like hyperbole, but this way of eating did completely transform my life from the very moment that I started it. So I guess that I'm going to leave it there for now. Long-winded story, but just to give you a little vibe, a little different thing going on. And I do apologize for the sounds of my footsteps and the shaky camera work, but felt like it was a good idea to be out in the woods today while I did this, just for a change of pace. So I wish you all love and light, a blessed day. Hang in there with your ascension process. Know that we're all in the perfect place, in the perfect moment, in our perfect timing. Everything is unfolding just as it should. Try not to look around you. Try not to compare and despair. It's bad enough to compare and despair in the social media realm, but taking the compare and despair energy over into the spiritual and ascension realm, oh, that's just painful. And listen, I'm not immune to that myself. It's hard to not want some more bells and whistles with stuff. Well, when am I going to talk to the galactic beings? Well, when am I going to da 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 da? And again, it's coming back to that place of trust. And I do have to say that, finding physical balance in your body, physical balance and healing in your body makes all the difference in the world. That alone shifts your reality so dramatically. Um, Everything else is just icing on the cake. You know, each day gets better. Everything unfolds easily and effortlessly. And it's not that you don't have challenges, because again, any dis-ease, any discomfort you're experiencing on a physical level, those are always have usually have, you know, roots on the emotional, mental, and spiritual level. You know, the physical is the last level to manifest those energies. So again, I just think it is so crucial to find balance. And if you don't find physical balance working with me and following this diet approach, which I highly encourage, then find it some other way. Honor your body, because this truly is the whole point of us ascension process this time around, is that, you know, we're carrying our physical bodies through this whole process. You know, if we wanted to just ascend the energies, bloop, we could just go. But the whole thing is that we're transforming physical reality down to the molecule, um, in this ascension journey. So, you know, a huge support in that is the proper way of eating. So, I hope this gave you some interesting information, and I hope to hear from some of you. And I will see you next time.